Hello. Welcome everyone to Edinburgh Printmakers. Thanks everyone for coming, making the time to come here. I think there'll be some people trickling down from the studio, but we'll just we'll start. And also, hello and thank you to everyone who's joining us online and from wherever you are. So the panel, as I said, that is recorded. I am Ilaria. I am the Heritage Engagement Officer here at Edinburgh Printmakers, and EP Culture Conversation, this is the third panel is a series of panel conversation with invited speakers to dwell a bit more into these questions that we have raised as part of our current exhibition, which is here around us. And the exhibition is called Whose Gallery Is It Anyway? So this exhibition opened on the 18th of April, and they'll still be on until the end of June. So there's only like 1 week and a bit left, and is inviting the public to take ownership of this gallery and bringing their artwork, curating the space, as well as the public has the possibility to book this space for free and organize their own activities, events, workshops, talks. And we've had loads of different activities throughout the last 2 months. We've had some pasta making workshops, we've had yoga classes, we've had loads of printmaking, obviously, workshops. We've had lunches and we've had play, and yeah, it's become a really generative and hybrid space, and it's been beautiful to see. So yeah, so today's panel will be focusing on one main guiding question, which is the relationship between artist, curator, and audience changing? And what kind of opportunity does this open up? So with this exhibition, with Whose Gallery Is It Anyway? Edinburgh Printmakers wanted to investigate the role of the curator within a public gallery as a mediator between the audience and artist and artwork. We wanted to open up this space and the debate to discuss changes in curatorial practices, as well where the artist becomes curator or the audience become artist, like it has happened, and curator in this specific case. So we're interested in the impact of this blurring of lines, the shifts of power dynamic and swapping of roles to construct visual narratives and interpret them through curation as a social practice, as well as a directed practice. So before I begin, I'd like to introduce the speakers of today. Unfortunately, Francis McKee, ex-director of CCA, is not here today with us, couldn't join us, but we have nonetheless a pretty interesting panel. And we were just saying how it's representing Glasgow and Edinburgh quite equally, with different people being either from Edinburgh but now based in Glasgow or vice versa. So to start off, I'll start with Christian Noel Charles. So Christian Noel Charles is a Black female artist currently living and working between Scotland, UK, and New York. A Syracuse, New York native, Christian's work is an exploration of female representation and self-love in a contemporary world. She has acquired a Bachelor of Fine Arts at the Cooper Union in New York City and a Master of Fine Arts at the Glasgow School of Art. She has presented works with Tramway in Glasgow, Edinburgh Printmakers, and South London Gallery in London, as well as Officine Grandi Riparazioni in Turin, Italy. Her work has been recently acquired by the Scottish National Gallery Collection and Glasgow Museum's collection. And today, Christian takes inspiration from today's pop culture, modern performance techniques, and personal experiences. She also derives inspiration as a video performance artist from the relationship between performer and audience member. By using the mediums of printmaking, video, and performance, her work demonstrates a celebration of self-love and individuality. So welcome, Christian. It's nice to have you here again. Christian was our summer exhibiting artist last year, so she's very much part of Edinburgh Printmakers. Then we're joined today by Rayan Song. Thanks for coming. Rayan Song, Glasgow-based artist Rayan Song explores self-mythologizing as a survival tactic, using fantasy and fabulation to establish a richly visual world-building practice informed by diasporic ancestral mythology, Taoism, family ritual, ecology, more than human politics, and science fiction. Song's world-building practice visions alternative social spaces unfettered from linear conceptions of space and time, and which disarm colonial patriarchal logistics and power structures. Instead, the twin foundations of these alternative spaces are the logics of Rayan's own human family and those of beyond human communities, particularly in relation to collaborative notions of symbiosis and multi-species entanglement. This world building happens fundamentally through drawing. Glimpses of this world then manifest themselves expansively through sculpture, installation, textile, video, sound, and performance as speculative and central environments. These spaces stand as multidimensional personal records that speak broadly and politically about foreignness, identity, survival, and what it means to belong or not. Whilst enigmatic and ambiguous, they also act generatively as offerings, visions of alternative cultures, inviting others to imagine their own vital, entangled futures. So thank you so much for coming all the way from Glasgow. And then we're joined today by Lucas Priest and Ezra Berenikov from Embassy Gallery. So Embassy, for anyone who's not familiar with it, is an artist-led organization based in Edinburgh that seeks to support early career artists through the facilitation of exhibitions, commissioning opportunities, events, and a public-facing programming. Embassy was established in 2003 and since then has been run by a rolling non-hierarchical committee. In September 2022, Embassy updated its governance structure in order to make changes to allow the role of the operational committee to be almost fairly paid. The gallery is now seeking to continue its legacy of DIY and collective organizing, whilst working under a more sustainable structure. Embassy is a non-hierarchical working environment, and as such, everyone holds a shared responsibility in all areas of work to ensure a collective involvement in decision-making. It is a learning environment in which together we give and receive support to one another and the practitioners we work with. Lucas specifically joined the operational committee in January 2023 and has since worked on the consolidation of the Embassy archive, developed the Move Slow and Fix Things program, and supported the wider membership community through the facilitation of the Community Takeover program, as well as contributing to the development of Embassy recent Creative Scotland multi-year funding application. For everyone. Lucas has fixed the toilet twice and repainted the walls an unknown amount of times. Lucas graduated from a BA Intermedia Art at ECA in 2022 and has since worked with Art Walk projects in Portobello, the Centre for Research Collections at Edinburgh University, and the University of Glasgow Thinking Culture programme. So thanks, Lucas, for coming. And Ezra has joined the operational committee in March of this year, jumping knee-deep into working on the multi-year funding application and co-creating Embassy's forthcoming artist development program. Ezra graduated from a BA Sculpture in 2023 and has since worked in arts programming for Articulate Culture Trust, supporting care experienced young people in arts, education, and as an access consultant for disability-led Birds of Paradise Theatre Company. They have most recently started Kiln Club, open access ceramic studio, and facilitate OBR, an autonomous social space in Glasgow that supports projects of This Is Rigged, Palestine Action, and the Glasgow hacker community. Lucas and Ezra, alongside Millie Player, Alice Diskin, and Lauren Green, currently make up the Embassy Operational Committee. Together, they are working on developing a new artist development program based around what art school never gave us and what emerging artists really need. That's a really nice title, not gonna lie. There will be an open call soon for participants. You can become a member of Embassy Gallery for as little as £2 a year, and Embassy is currently seeking new trustees to join the board. So great, thank you for sending all that information. It's very nice to meet you all. So today we're just gonna kind of talk a little bit, as I mentioned, about this main question of whether the relationship and all these identities that we call curator, artist, and audience are shifting and changing and maybe blurring the lines among them. I have a few questions that you're aware of, which I'll use as a guiding, but we're very keen for the conversation to ebb and flow, so feel free to talk and share your experiences and also add questions if other people. There'll be some time at the end for public questions, also for the people online, which can either speak or write in the chat. So yeah, I'll start with the first one, which is a bit of a sort of breaking the ice kind of question, I guess. And it's open to everyone. And it's, how would you define the role of the curator in current practice? It's a big question. so you can take it. Or especially, I'm curious about it right now and what you've seen sort of more recently, more than at an academic level. I don't know if Brian, you want to start us off?
Well, I think in my experience working with curators, the ones that I find most nourishing and the relationships that I hold dear are the ones who, I guess, the curators who are there from the beginning and are really listening, like really listening to the artists' dreams and visions and ideas for what they want to do. And the curator becomes like a pal, like a really useful pal who's able to like advocate for it and to question it and to poke at it and to think with you and to kind of blend it with their own knowledge and their own kind of links to other interesting people who could nourish it further. Someone who listens and cares and thinks with you throughout and advocates that work to the very end. And keeps trying to push it. I think the artist is constantly trying to push the institution. And I think it's great when the curator is also positively pushing the artist to do their best work. And to think beyond that first kind of seed of an idea and for allowing it to kind of flourish into something that's so much greater. So I think that's what institute, what a curator is for me in the way that I kind of value.
That's very good. Cece, do you have?
I'm piggybacking on like I feel like it's been like a love-hate relationship with curators with me. I think it's one of those things where it literally depends on, I think, the values and foundations of what I guess a curator intentions is in terms of making a space or like creating a program or like literally almost they're meant to make something happen. I think I kind of balance curator and producer at like almost the same platform because they're supposed to support you in navigating your ideas to put into fruition. And I think I have a colleague who runs Cabbage in Glasgow, and they do video production and performance. And they approached me when I was doing my master's, and I think that it's usually like a spark of like, oh, I love your work at the very beginning. And then I was shocked because I was like, but like how so? But like didn't answer. But it was like we were basically had the same ideals and visions that was easy to have conversations and see what could go into kind of fruition. We're still making kind of events to this day, like in period, like just like something in 2019 and doing something with them in 2024. And it reminds me of how much joy within the process of really almost like not battling it out, but literally just like always questioning everything that's in front of us and how do we build that and make that into a way that the audience can easily understand. So. Yeah,
because it sounds from both of you that it's like you're saying it's a listener, but then so it's not just fully passive, it's an active listening where they're like co-producing almost, and there's a give and take continuous with your own thoughts and their thoughts.
Like an enabler, because I guess the curator often has one foot in the institution and the other foot in the artist studio, and then it's kind of allowing those links and both conceptually and practically helping to make the work become something that can be public and can be out, have an outward presence.
How do you feel about that being in an artist-run sort of organization, but also having worked with other organizations that we've heard?
Like Embassy is like a artist-run institution, so it's kind of like those roles are like all mixed up from the beginning anyway. It's kind of the point of like how it's been for a while. But I think we can still like track a change in like what the committees have programmed. In the last few years, we've been creating an archive to try and trace some history, because embassy basically has no memory beyond a couple of years, the last 20 years. But it's been interesting to see that, like, much more recently, it's been more about like facilitating the space itself as a community space and like opening it up for a kind of wider access. We've kind of formalized the process of people coming and booking the space for free, and like that being part of what being a member of Embassy Gallery means, which I think has been like important for us. Like we're curating, but we're creating kind of from a step back. Like a lot of the recent programming within the last 6 months hasn't really been us, it's been our membership community, but we've been trying to focus on that, how we can like make the space somewhere like people feel like they can come in and like make it their own.
So you're kind of being curators as a way of supporting people, or in a way that they're feeling supported. So you're an identity and makes other people feel supported by not being.
Yeah, and I think as well, like the fact that we're curators and the caretakers and the fundraisers
Takers.
and everything, like I think that does inform that, because we don't feel too much like any one thing. We're just trying to make it happen. And I think the exciting thing with somewhere like Embassy is just like, yeah, you have a bit of money from Creative Scotland, and you can like make a bit of a scene happen. It's just like exciting, and I just want like people come to us with ideas, and we just want to, yes, let's do it.
Like you're answering one of the questions. What are the opportunities within blurring of this line? And you just said like you're creating a scene. And that's great. No, it's good to know. I was wondering, Ezra, if you had anything you'd like to add.
Maybe just going off of that, also like a understanding of what CC and Ray have said, like it does feel like this active like braiding of like your own values, like as a curator, then with artists, and your own values as an artist as well, like responsibly with like the needs of the community, and then like current events, and like being accountable to all those things like comes together, and it like makes this like really active, like bubbling thing. It doesn't feel like in a box.
Yeah. There's a lot of really nice words that you all used, like listening and braiding, and and it's really interesting. I guess the next question, you've really a bit touched on this, Cici, but I was wondering if you could all share like a curatorial project, whether it was yours. I do know that all of you have sort of engaged as well in curatorial projects more recently, maybe then. Or another curatorial project that you've seen that you attended as public that has impacted you in some way, and why? So you mentioned that you work with this curator, and you still work as producer, curator, and you're like super intertwined. But if anything else comes to mind.
You know what's interesting? It's like when I hear about the embassy days, so I was on the committee in 2019 for a year, and like, yeah, I was on embassy committee. Yeah, I was living in Glasgow, so I was commuting back and forth.
Memory.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
no memory. I was going on to the name, but I remember at that time, it was like, when I did my first curatorial project, it was like, bless your heart, and I like was pretty ambitious of bringing people from all throughout the UK to Edinburgh in a way, and a summer show as well, I think at the time. And it was the first time I got to see 4 different artists with 4 very different personalities. And like, how do you navigate the care for an artist to make sure that everything kind of comes into fruition? And these were like 4 performance artists. And like, and as a performance artist myself, it was a teachable moment of really understanding their practice and how they were as an individual, and how do you navigate kind of the conversation into it. And it really taught me a lot of humility in the end. So then when I think about, as a performance artist specifically, when I do work with producer and curator within that kind of relationship, this is why it's kind of Jenny, because I do performance work with her, where it's literally like I always make sure that we're always on the same page consistently in terms of like what the vision is, and what we're trying to aim, and make sure that it was always consistent. And like for me, I always said, it's like I have to have a safe word to make sure that we're like not too high and stressed when deadlines get closer. Because that, like, yeah, like I have to say like Banji, to calm myself down and it keeps the laughs going. And I applied it to all my practices now. Because you're almost at like a person to person level individually when you're working with people, especially at a high strung like environment, trying to make something happen. And like, and that really kind of changes a lot of, and honestly, the emotions that apply really can really reflect in the work that's being put out. And people would see that. So I feel like I kind of like really recycle every project that I encounter and who I've worked with in that moment and really kind of reflect on our relationship because every single time. So, yeah.
Anything from you guys, any curatorial project that you would like? Oh,
I was a participant on the Collective Studio program at Newbridge Project, which is like a artist run space in Newcastle. And that is like a artist development program, kind of like a mix of like an alternative foundation course and an alternative MFA, kind of like all together. Like some people would use it as an access to higher education, other people will have just graduated. But I found that like really inspiring for what we're developing now at Embassy. It's like a new artist development program, kind of in the image of that. But I really loved like being in kind of like an art school context, but it's like outside of an academic institution. It was like with just this like great group of people that had gotten together and get together in Newcastle once a month, and the program itself was delivered by the group of people who were the participants the year before.
all right.
So like each monthly session was delivered by someone who did the program last year, and last year that they had the same process, and then in January I kind of went as Embassy with some other committee members, and we went and contributed to this year's one. So it's this really nice kind of like community feeding back into itself and kind of envisaging like what happens when you're trying to be an artist outside of art school, or just kind of doing your own thing and just trying to make it trying to make it work.
You kind of see this like methodology or this like kind of being taken from there and applied in other situations. You were mentioning, like, are you considering that for Embassy as sort of mentoring?
Yeah, and like
the artist become curator for the next kind of batch of artists and so on.
Yeah, because I think also just like art school is just like getting worse and worse. The kind of like neoliberal university and the whole phenomenon of students as customers, and you can, I feel like you can see it at ECA, the quality of what students are able to produce and the support they have is like reducing, and it's kind of sad to see, but it just means more and more people are coming out frustrated with the experience they have and not equipped, and like I feel like there's a real energy there for like just more stuff where it's like we get together and we like make what we wish we had experienced. I feel like art school should be a chance for people to get together.
And
like,
that has
really
the
have
knowledge.
that like great like studio energy and just kind of going away. So there's lots of people with an appetite for making that kind of activity happen, and like Embassy is doing less and less like exhibitions, but just more like facilitating a space where people can come and regularly meet and develop their practice together. And that's kind of like definitely been a shift, I think, in our thinking of like what we actually want to put into our programming and how we want to like shape how the space is used. And
that's really nice, the way that the space isn't just institutionalized and set in its structures, what it's been made to be, but it's like something that's malleable, and you're able to shift it to what the arts community, the local arts community requires, and that is lacking from art school. I think that's nice, and I think that's what I guess community projects are about. You know, it's about being activated and changing to people's needs and wants. So,
and curating those kind of projects often means adapting, and like shifting.
yeah.
I wonder, Ryan, because you've recently done an exhibition at CCA in Glasgow, but in the exhibition sort of material in the brochure, you've not used the word curating, you used it collating.
Yeah.
And I like that. Because I was like, oh, there's an intent there to not use the word curating.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, would you consider yourself you were a curator or a sort of new identity
No,
that you
yeah,
that you've kind of called the collator?
I'm kind of nothing really. I'm not a curator. That's why I guess that's more the collation is more a verb where I just swept some things up and engaged with other people. But I think I strongly remain just me and an artist figuring things out. The CCA show was something I wanted to use as an experiment and as a research exhibition and a live program. Yeah,
And that's what
therefore,
I was also-
that's why I was. So I called it a collated research exhibition and live program, and it involved over 20 artists, 20 artists and thinkers, who I invited to be part of this kind of project, to kind of think with me. And beyond me around ideas of world building and from their own perspectives and their own experiences and their own empathetic natures and positions. And it was, I guess, maybe I kind of went into it quite naively, but I definitely wanted to nourish what research was for me, which before that was something quite solitary. It's something that happens in the studio, kind of with I guess reading materials, screen-based imagery or video materials that would feed into the work, but it wasn't so much active conversations or dialogue or questionings or I wanted something more lively. And I think in my making and my working is always about making something exist in some way, making something lively. And so it just felt natural to use CCA as a space where I could really poke that and play with it with others, and work out what research could be for me. And it is definitely something more dynamic in terms of approaching people and like it's like having dates. Which I really love.
And more shared and less lonely of an activity.
And
like
it was
solitary.
also just so much more mutual and understanding one another and on a human level as well. It was like, for instance, getting in touch with a particle physicist or a geologist and a sociologist, and me not knowing anything of their field, but they also not knowing anything of my field, and but kind of being honest in that and excited and curious to know one another and what we do, and that was the foundation of how we kind of had a relationship to, and how that fed into the exhibition. So that became like material works, and but then also the live program was a really big aspect of that project, where it didn't just end with the kind of physical space, but it was about that space continuously changing and moving about and shifting with different events and different performances, different dialogues, workshops, and it literally changed the show and the energy in the space, and made it into, I quite like to think of it almost like a commons and a civic space where you can go there and dwell and spend time there, and there was a library section where people could spend time and not feel the need to look at things and constantly be activated by other aspects, but were engaging in their own way and not feeling pressured to be part of something or active in something, but were just within it.
Which resonates a lot with what has been happening here for the last 2 months. You're saying this exhibition has been becoming more and more alive in different ways and different what you said, sort of energies and atmospheres in here according
Yeah.
to what was happening. And there's an aspect there of accessibility. You're just saying that people don't feel that they need to act a certain way,
Yeah.
and there is this sort of lingering kind of behavioral rules people need to follow in galleries and how they need to behave. Or sort of
I
move
think-
around the space. And you were saying you could just sit and
Exactly.
Read.
I think that sense of, I guess, is, I
Have to
don't
be
know,
audience.
I have a, I don't know, particular thoughts around socially engaged practices, and that it can often like go into more problematic areas where there's a kind of forcing of audience engagement, and or like engaging with communities up to a point, and then when the project ends, the community is left with what, and it's more about the artist gaining something, and so there's an unequal power dynamic there. So yeah, I'm kind of more interested in that kind of passive activation or engagement, and it's the audience kind of choosing to be part of events, and from there is a willingness of sharing and being in a room together and sharing energies. And so yeah, they could either engage or not, like cerebrally, in events and dialogue, but then there was a part of my work, there was a tea fungus that was fermenting in the space. So no matter what, they were like actively engaged in the fermentation of the environment and the tea fungus.
That's what you mean, passive. Engagement.
Yeah, so it was I guess it was playing with like how people are in spaces and how things are activated and how things move around and change, and it's allowing for spontaneous activity, but also just allowing things to dwell and sit. And
I feel like I got to know you more from the exhibition in a way that it's like you gave entry points to make everyone feel comfortable where we should guide ourselves. And I think when I think about like how spaces are navigated, it's like I feel like at least what I'm seeing recently, I think people are being more conscious of the entry points of like to really have to understand the artist instead of like a demand. Because I'm one of those people who unfortunately I don't read text. I want to see what it looks like in the work, but like just like in the space, but you could feel like it's almost like you like they are like there is a guide that's taking you into the way that it needs to witness in a way in those spaces. And it was so satisfying.
right. Yeah, no, I think what you just picked up on, like that journey, I think it's so important. I find it's really important to like, I guess as the artist or even as the curator, it is a guide. And it's that idea of journey through a space and things to look at on the way or listen to or like feel and experience. But it's, and a guide is someone who kind of, you know, gently shows you things, but you can do what you want. And it's, and there's kind of that play of, allowing the audience to do that.
I think there's a threat here about making the spaces of the gallery less, as you mentioned before, this tradition of exhibition after exhibition after exhibition, and more like a generative space and a creative space, and also a space where audience can feel comfortable and can feel welcome in different ways. And because I'm thinking, Cece, of the way, so for anyone who doesn't know, Cece turned this gallery into a salon last summer, with very much like a salon with like a reception desk and chairs and sofa, and connecting to how you find the salon to be your sort of safe space and space of community and self-love. I don't know if you want to talk about that, because I found that exhibition really interesting on how much this space that I know very well could become so different and so so welcoming in you know in a light that I hadn't seen it before.
I guess with my work, it's like my entry points are it's nostalgia. It's really things that feel familiar to me that everybody could relate to easily. A salon, everybody sits down in a chair and looks in the mirror. I can't stop looking at the mirror myself. And the way, but it was like, how do you, for me, with prints particularly, like, how do you look Like, I want people to witness prints. That's how you look in the mirror in the salon. It's the way that you're kind of gazing with each other and like those relationships. Also, I disapprove of white walls consistently, so they have to be all colored. So because it changes the energy in the space easily for me.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of really, you're considering the care of how you even enter an office, how comfortable you want to be in a waiting room, or like even like sitting on a train. It's like you're very observant. People, you may not recognize it, but everyone's observant of their surroundings and what even their boundaries are in terms of what feels comfortable. So like, yeah, for me, I always have to have a comfortable seat because my feet hurt. Like little things and details, but it's kind of like making sure everybody's on the same understanding platform just from the get-go in that. Where I think sometimes when it comes to galleries and kind of curation, especially in a like commercial gallery context, like people, like I still keep remembering Dennis Adams, but too, it's like to invest in a painting and you have to look at it for like 20 minutes. And then that like frustrates me. But it frustrates me in the best way because it's like, I want that experience, but I don't want it in the basic context. So because it feels like because I think people in the last 5 seconds, so it's easier to kind of like when people really take consideration of the entire space beyond the work, it's easier to kind of navigate of how people really witness and care for work. So, and I think it's a different way of seeing completely when everything is activated around. I'm a little bit of a maximalist. Yeah.
Definitely a maximalist show. But as you said, the energy definitely shifted with color. I wonder, if you guys have anything to add in terms of what you were mentioning before, like creating a more generative space. And I guess maybe I'm more interested in how, the work curator that you avoided, and I understand why, comes with its own definition, historical, even weight to it, and also specific power dynamic. I think, especially from more historical, more institutional ways of understanding the role of the curator, and all of you think challenge this power dynamic. I think collating relinquishes a lot of that power and makes it more of a shared experience, and you're just bringing together their work.
Well, I think I'm really poor at editing things. I keep wanting more and more, so it's maybe to do more of my greed, and therefore a curator maybe edits things.
Right, that's interesting. So curator, you'd say you would very much edit, and you feel
There's
like
a
you just brought it
selectiveness,
together.
but then when it just in talking about the comfort of audiences, I just wanted to know as well that not all spaces should be comfortable. Like artists are often provoke, and that is a very good thing, an important thing, and can make spaces that are uncomfortable necessarily. But then it's more about the curator to kind of do some guidance to that, to kind of to think about the setup of that, or to think about the journey of that and how to enter that, and allow the audience to absorb that in a way, or go into that world and engage with it more rather than be affronted by it.
That's a very good point.
I think, going off of that, like I completely agree. It's like on one hand, like you're practicing like kind of commoning and like able to like create a space, like a third space where like people can share in like resources and knowledge, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's like a safe space. Like a safe space doesn't necessarily mean you're not challenged and like you are affronted by things, and in that way, like you're able to like co-create a dynamic where like people can be autonomous and like encounter things and like really try to like reckon with things that they haven't encountered before, which is like really exciting. And I felt like that, like when I went to your exhibition, like it was like an ability to like stay with it and like be in that space for a while and like yeah, think about how I was like looking or learning in a way I hadn't really done before. So that was quite like exciting. It's like thinking about like how are we co-creating with the audience and the artists in these third spaces where they kind of almost feel lawless, like in a way where we're like, this is a completely new opportunity to learn in a different way, which is really cool.
That's actually a really good segue to one of the other questions, which I'll ask you as you just mentioned it. So where was it? Yes. So the question, in what ways can you, if you haven't already, or have you, if you're really kind of been thinking about these things, introduce the audience into the curatorial process?
Yeah, I think we were actually like doing that through like a community takeover program. I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like the community takeover program was an attempt to like formalize just a process that was kind of just like offhand, which is people email embassy all the time and they're like, can I do this thing in your space? And especially now that we've transitioned to this model where we're paying people, that means that we're planning stuff much further in advance. And we also want to be clear and transparent with how we're paying people, how much we're paying them, make sure people are paid fairly. But then a kind of like negative side effect that came from that was just that it felt like that really like off the cuff DIY access to the space was kind of diminishing because things were becoming more kind of like formalized and slower and fairer. So we kind of split our program in two. So we have our core program, which is like fully budgeted, kind of projected 6 months to a year in advance. And then we have our community takeover program, which is literally just open and you just email us and the space is free when you want it.
Which is quite great. It like responds, it's like really responsive to like current events and like current needs that like rupturing and emerging like between groups that like they can respond to like immediate effects of something and then go, okay, we want to create an event or a social space, or like we need somewhere safe for between us, or to like present something like an argument to the public. So I feel like in that way that like elasticity is like really important.
Yeah, that's almost like an open dialogue with the public, where they can become creators and remain public as well. Do you have it open all the time? Or is there, like you say, it's interspersed in between your
Yeah,
programs?
it's kind of just generally open. Because the core program isn't like ram-packed, we're deliberately doing it a bit more slowly, a bit more spaced out, so that it's done properly. Then
More
the space
sustainable.
is quite often available and we want it to be used. I mean, we rent the space, so I mean, we're paying rent for this empty gallery, so let's get people in there, let's make stuff happen. And like, we're just clear that like, you know, our core program is where people are like fairly paid and it's pre-budgeted, and we have either like open calls that we try and give like a reasonable time span for like applying to, or we're like directly curating and reaching out to artists. That is like our fairly paid pre-budgeted like union rates program. And then the community takeover is more just like, you want to do your thing and you want to do it like next week, like here's like 2 days, like you can just like have the space, we're not going to charge you. That's our like support.
Are you involved in it, in the community? Like, do you give them support, or is it?
Yeah, we don't promise anything.
Just because of our own capacity.
Yeah.
It's like,
So you're not, for lack of a better word, curating what they're bringing in. You're very like off.
I mean, there is this like tension between like how open it is and like where our line lies with saying no to an idea. And like whether embassy has a certain level of like standard of something that we don't accept, and also kind of like ethical considerations of what we platform and really platform and stuff. So that's like a constant conversation. We haven't drawn up any kind of like solid things for that now, but I think that's something that's kind of coming as this is becoming more and more part of what embassy is. So,
Because it's very much what this space has been for the last 2 months, like free to book and use. And we've talked about that too, how much freedom. And then that you recognize that then you're responsible for this space, as you said, you pay rent and you're part of this committee who had the responsibility of this gallery and the representation. Yeah, wonder if you both in your work, I know you consider the audience in your work, Cici, especially in your performances. Have you introduced the audience into the curatorial process at all? Or has the audience played more or less of a role at times when you were creating new work?
That was a good question. I feel like I would say I was always a jester in terms of the audience. It's like that's what the phrase came in. Doing but like I feel like I was always someone like a character that was navigating people easily, because I grew up in the ways of the Harlem Renaissance in terms of theater performance particularly, and vaudeville, and how like literally it's almost kind of like my boundary is separating like the audience, but also I feel like it was a challenge of my validation at the time. But I feel like now it's like I really just always, I keep the phrase "welcome to my world" every single time. It's a little selfish, but it's like, but it's a phrase that introduces of like you're entering into a space where you literally are really trying to get to know me or understand what I'm thinking about in that moment. And it's kind of like almost feel, I always like, I watch so much Willy Wonka. Like in that way that really, that it's like it's that guide and easily engaged. So like those are kind of like the phrases that keep recurring, or things that I would keep watching to remind myself of where you are as an artist when you have that space of the audience entering in. So, yeah.
It sounds like new performances are kind of embodying the curator, at least in this idea of the curator as the guiding, the gentle guiding force for the audience, but also being the artist, like producing and curating that relationship as well.
I guess the difference is it's like, I feel like when the audience is kind of provoked or like they try to find something, it's like it's them navigating to find that click. And it's like almost introducing a conversation behind it. No, with either like a sound or a personality or like whatever action they take. But you don't know how deep they're gonna actually go. It almost hits your soul a little bit. So it's like kind of always figuring out that teetering and challenging. So I think of it as like in ways of like, if you're like curating it or like producing it, it's a parameter that you're really built upon it, and then you're just seeing how it flows. And like that parameter is like kind of like the little bit of the wall or the little bit of the path that like we're collectively navigating, but it's like a space that's held to make sure that we're all, it's easier conversing, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
I just noticed the time. So I might actually stop here for now and just see if anyone from the public has any questions or anything has spurred some inspiration what we've talked, or also online, Astrid, if you can let us know. Yeah, Paul?
I was just interested in what you were saying about, you know, the community side of the Embassy Gallery and being able to open it up as much as you can. But then what you were just talking about, that there's an element where you've still got to impose some guidelines on what can and can't happen. So, and that in itself is creation of the opportunities, isn't it? And what can and can't happen. So how are you going about determining what can and what can't happen?
Yeah, I think like I was saying, like the process isn't formalized in like the way that a non-hierarchical kind of committee works, is that we just talk out and we just think like what is this about, who is saying what, and like, does that align with what we feel like we want embassy to be? And, but like, also we're pretty open and hands off with that, and like, really try hard to say yes to as many things. And I think, like, at least me personally, like, I would rather embassy be more open and have things that aren't that good than be more closed but just have really good things. Like, I think embassy is also a chance for people to make mistakes. And like, a lot of these people are coming and just putting on a show off their own back. Maybe it's the first time they've done something like that. And like, the fact that we can be that chance for them, I think, is more important to me, I think, than the work being like this.
So a follow-on question then for that would be, to what extent do you feel constrained by what your funders want of you?
Yeah, so embassy is funded primarily by Curator Scotland. We have like a bit of a relationship with ECA, with the university as well. And we do a little bit of teaching in exchange for some money, but vast majority of it is Curator Scotland. They're pretty hands-off, which has been really nice. We've never had them contact us and say, actually, you shouldn't have done that thing, or you can't do that thing. We're worried about that at times, and we have almost like preempted that by asking them, just like, yeah, you can do it. Is that the kind of answer you're thinking, or were you thinking about just the amount of money?
Yeah, I'm just interested because, you know, we're applying for the similar kind of funding as well. And when we're applying, we have to commit to be doing certain things, whether that's like we're going to do X, Y, and Z in terms of community outreach. We're going to work with schools. So we're having to. We're having to think about future programs.
We're on what they call regular funding, so that can be differences of requirements. Project funding, which I would imagine embassy gets, which is a lot more flexible.
We're actually not on project funding. We're in this weird thing that Curator Scotland started a pilot program for artist-run spaces. So we're on this thing that was really like the sort of project of Amanda Cato, the old but yeah, that's really weird because that's like it was supposed to be a year, but then it got extended to like 5 years. We just received the last bit of money for that. So like this year was the last year of it. Kind of now that the multi-year funding kind of thing is coming into movement, and I mean that's been great. For 5 years, we've not had to apply for any money. We've just been given it.
It's great.
And we just have to report on it. Reporting has been pretty stripped back. We just have to say how it's been spent, and as long as we're not like hoarding it all, essentially.
You need to spend it.
Yeah.
I think
sorry. Sorry, I was just going to say that, like, in thinking on that, I would think that the largest limitation we have, like, it's our own selves, like, as curators, it's like our own perspective, it's like, who are we not reaching, like, who would take up the call of like community takeover? Like, we might think that we're already reaching out to people that wouldn't normally want to engage, but like, we don't know that entirely, like, we have to think beyond our own perspectives and like hold each other accountable. It's that as a team of us. So yeah, I think in terms of that, like, not necessarily like limitations set by a funding body, it's just like an ability to maintain like a refreshed perspective of like, who are we not engaging with, like
kind of limitations on your networks that
Yeah.
you might not. What are you going to say?
I was just going to say the 5-year funding is great because, I mean, I think that's integral for artist-run spaces because just over the years, knowing different people in different artist-run spaces is that constant worry and time-consuming labor to often unpaid to do an annual fundraising, and this is by people who are artists and often straight out of art school, and what you're talking about is important for people to experiment and fail in the space and be able to do that, but also it's like you guys are also doing that because you're learning what it's like to be in an artist-run space and to be navigating this community, and it's, you know, you're learning about these responsibilities. And what just picking up on what you said earlier as well, like being an artist-run space and being able to change and shift to aspects and kind of being socially aware and politically aware of what's happening around you quite immediately, compared to other institutions, like take Palestine, for example. Like all the artist-run spaces were able to talk about that and acknowledge it, and have community use their space towards pro-Palestinian activism, when a lot of other institutions that are more formalized aren't able to, or haven't done so because of their own fears of their funding bodies or their audiences or so there's far more rigidity in that, and therefore it just is a reminder that it's so important to have artist-run spaces and community spaces to be able to provoke and push and show these models of how to be, rather than the more rigid structures that are status quo.
Well,
So, yeah.
the transparency is way clearer and easier because the thread is smaller. Versus of like I guess in terms of like bigger hierarchical like institutions, it's there's always something behind and like that. And it always feels like it's always delayed or like guarded or guarded.
It becomes more fearful, and it becomes more
Structured.
exactly, and it's like a harder body of an institution, whereas the flexibility and
I mean, we kind of touched on by saying it's very much a matter of the structure now, but one of the questions I had here, we couldn't really get to it, was how can art spaces become more inclusive and supporting of changing relationships, and then changing relationship between curator, artist, audience, which I think is what happens in art spaces, and kind of said it's mainly for the way it is structured, but I think I'm going to try and close this conversation, which has been so interesting, with asking all of you what would you hope from non-artist spaces, not artist run spaces, but more kind of institutionalized organization, whether they're smaller, like on the smaller side like ourselves, or even more institutionalized spaces like National Gallery, for example, like really institutionalized spaces. What would be your hopes in terms of adapting sort of some of these ways and methodologies that artist run spaces can kind of use?
I think like a willingness to like take a risk, but be like trusting of people, of artists. I guess there's the potential that it could go wrong, but I think it kind of would. I think at embassy we rather have the attitude of like trying to trust people to bring themselves and their practice to a space and like make of that like a great opportunity. I think like kind of things like how this space has been free and bookable and stuff like, I mean, literally just being free. Like some of the spaces, it's like 300 quid a day or something to hire it. And it's like, not many people can do that.
I guess, it's in this, I mean, we're in dire times where there's so many cuts, and there's so many cuts to like civic spaces. And kind of libraries where people can be together for free and not feel pressured to spend any money. And often it falls upon art spaces to become these sort of civic spaces. And I guess having that sort of responsibility, or that feeling of responsibility, it's in a dire time, but then it's also about thinking about that creatively and how you can work with that, and how you talked about those community kind of takeovers, and how that could be, how you could still bring curation into it, but thinking about how that is folded in fundamentally in the curation, like inviting artists to kind of think about these attributes and think about ways to creatively and differently do things with different audiences,
Mhm.
how the space can be used throughout an exhibition rather than just being a static exhibition. Like how can that change over time, and how can
Yeah.
it involve many other people apart from the artist?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Do you have a question? Yes. No, just go there. Super.
So, it's about going back to relationship between creative audience and artists. So in your artistic process, do you find thinking about the audience, does that only come in the curation of your work once it's finalized, or is it earlier in the stages of your artistic process? And do you find thinking about the audience limiting or inspiring as well?
Well, for the show I just did at CCA, it was very much integrating that live program element into the whole exhibition, the whole project. So I think from the get-go, it was thinking of the 12-week duration of that show being an active study group almost, or like a school, and therefore, yeah, like there was a resource library space, there was a lot of seating, there was a stage, and throughout the kind of making of the exhibition, it was continuous conversations with the artists and thinkers and planning that program. So that program was released at the same time as the exhibition opening. And so audiences who came in would then find out about what was happening each week. And that would be like a workshop around microbes of fermentation. It'd be like, it'd be a study group around quantum physics and dark matter, or it was kind of, there was a dinner around insects and screening, so a whole range of things. So it was very much integral to have the audience as part of that and to feed into it. And yeah, to kind of create that space as well. And I think it's been really nice getting to know loads of audiences as well. So I was at each event and just seeing the people who went to quite a few events and would regularly come back and be part of it. And it was very much like they were a part of the show, and I got to know different people, particularly like I'm thinking about people who are in a fermenting community, and from then on they helped me house the tea fungus when I had to deinstall, and now they're divvying it out across Glasgow for free. So loads of people get this some tea fungus to have at home. And so this mother, it's called the mother, it's like that is literally like spread across. So it's really nice to think about that audience, that human audience, but also this non-human audience kind of spreading out. So yeah, I really think kind of meshing it is a lot of value to me. It kind of makes everything a lot stronger beyond myself.
What about you?
I was just gonna say, like, in response to that, it sounds like in terms of like an audience, like you were able to take that personal experience of like approaching like physicists, etc., and like not knowing something and like be able to explore that, and you were able to translate that experience to then people coming into a gallery, like, which is a really vulnerable thing to like often do, and you're not sure what you're going to encounter, and you're able to give over that experience where it's like, I can go into a space and like not know anything about this thing.
Yeah.
It like, it makes me, I don't know who said it, but it's like the whole thing about defeating imposter syndrome is like not about the breadth of your knowledge, but the depth of your curiosity. You're able to like turn over and co-create those spaces like with people where it's like you can just learn something entirely new, like in that way, from like a personal experience to like a collective one.
I think from the very beginning I was always scratching my head, and like I guess it came from a place of vulnerability of not knowing anything. But that being thinking of it as a problem and not knowing anything, it was more of a an announcement from the very beginning saying like, I don't know anything.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of journeying through this abyss to work out things for myself around ideas of world building, ideas of ancestry, and how that all kind of flows and creates more questions for myself.
With
But
the
that,
generative.
yeah, and it's like if I don't know I don't know anything about dark matter, but obviously like, probably so many people don't know about anything. So wouldn't it be cool to just like learn from a physicist about dark matter and everyone can come?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like it's quite simple.
Well, like, it's just basically like you're holding a space and you never know who's watching.
Yeah.
Those opportunities, and I think that's the thing, you're like, you're creating a space that you're sharing your interests, your topics and what you're inspired by. And the people who are interested are gonna be drawn to it regardless. And it's gathering, you're gathering almost people. And then when you think about it in like an artist's perspective, no matter like the levels, you never know who's watching. So then like you're building relationships time to time in those moments that kind of expand and help you support your practice in the end. And it's like the amount of connections built that you grow within even those moments at times from a single event or a moment of a performance. It's those are the links.
Yeah.
Those are actually the moments that you really connect with the community that you really want to be with sometimes. So, but you know, it's like, but it's like friends, you know who your friends are and who you like to be in company with. The same thing in terms of like artistic partnerships and relationships and what that consists of. So, it's very unexpected, but it's once you're like almost clocked in, aware of realizing those opportunities are in front of you, it's like, that's the chance.
That's great. I think that's a very nice note to end on. I like this idea of like as a generative space and curiosity, and I don't know who said that, but I love it. And linking and connecting and gathering. So unless anyone else has other questions, and the online people all good. So I just thank you all again for coming. Thank you for coming, making time for this and bringing your opinions and your experience. It's been really so nice to chat with all of you. And yes, thanks everyone. We will have one more panel next week, if anyone is interested. That is the last week of this exhibition, as I said at the beginning, and the last panel conversation will be around placemaking in Fountain Bridge, which, as you can see by walking around, is still very much an area in construction, being built. And we here at Edinburgh Printmakers really want to play a crucial sort of central role in placemaking and making sure the community knows that we're here and we're a creative space for them. So if you're free, it's at 6:30 again, and next Thursday. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah.